So, from an ethical perspective, we really look at some of the ways in which we ethically have a responsibility to make sure that we're doing the best job that we can to understand who our clients are and what is important to them. One of the ways that we can do that is by encouraging the areas that we will be exploring with clients and identifying those in the informed consent. I have always thought this is a great idea to put in your informed consent and in your first meeting with the client to say that as human beings, we all have many different aspects of ourself. Just like a book has many chapters, I like to give an analogy. And each chapter of this book is important to the entire book. And so my job as a therapist is to help discover with you what are the chapters within your own book of life that are important to you. And, one of those chapters may be religion, spirituality, your faith beliefs, and how that is a part of your life, either in a good way or maybe in some challenging ways. So I think if we can introduce the dialogue and warm clients up to this, I think ethically that is a great way to help clients begin the process and to let them know that we are comfortable discussing this and we're putting it out there right away, that this is one of the areas that we willingly and openly would like to explore with them. It's not something that we as an individual practitioner feel is taboo or feel is inappropriate to talk about or are afraid to explore with a client. We welcome the discussion and interaction and hearing from the client. Personal values and biases. This can often be a big one because we know that people have very diverse belief systems, and this is true between a therapist and a client. So if you have a client that comes in and has a very fundamentally different religious or spiritual framework than you do, that is hard for you to understand, that can present some challenges ethically. And so we know that ethically, we are responsible for being aware of our biases. We are responsible for suspending our own personal values. We are also responsible for not imparting our values, our beliefs, our practices, our preferences onto our clients. And we're going to talk more about this here in terms of some of the missteps when we look at a couple of case studies. Clinical competence. One could argue that a clinician is not fully being competent if they are not integrating conversations around religion and spirituality. Would you all agree with that? Do you think that a practitioner that avoids integrating, inquiring, assessing about religion and spirituality, do you think that they have a lower level of competence in their practice? Do you think they're missing something? And that they're missing a piece of important practice? And do you think this speaks to their competence if they are systematically just avoiding conversations about religion and spirituality? Yeah, I think, as I said a minute ago, I think it would be akin as a therapist, if I'm negating a client's emotional experience in life, that I would not be viewed as competent because I'm not being empathetic. I'm not validating that aspect of themselves. And so I think we can make the argument that if clinicians, and I think this is happening more often than not, and it doesn't mean the clinician's a bad clinician. I just think it means that, again, maybe they haven't had the training. Maybe they were told by a supervisor, don't talk about religion with your clients. And so they've just been missing that piece. There are some clinicians that are afraid. They're not sure how to ask. They're not sure what response they're going to get. They're not sure what to do with that information. And so I think that if we're unsure, we kind of tiptoe around it and then it kind of just gets avoided. And I don't know about you all, and I'm thinking back to my grad school, my MSW experience. I think I had one class with one professor talked about from a theoretical perspective, academic perspective, talked about religion and spirituality, but it was not something that was integral in my MSW program. And I went through, I think, a really good MSW program, but that piece I think was really lacking. And I don't know about you all and your educational experiences. When I was a professor, we spent one full class, which was 3 hours, on almost like the training we're doing today. Why is it important? Here are clinical tools. Let's do some role plays. Let's watch a few videos. and I really emphasize with my clients, with my students, the importance of that. I also taught a loss and grief class, and spirituality and faith and religion was a central component of that class, and really looking at the connection between grief and spirituality, religion, and faith. Consultation and collaboration. So this comes up ethically when you're working with a client that perhaps is sharing some of their belief system, some of their faith, some of their religious belief, and you have very little knowledge and information. And one of the kind of cultural rules that we have in our profession around cultural awareness and cultural, sensitivity is we do not expect clients to teach us. They can teach us. We can learn from our clients, but it's not our clients' jobs to teach us about everything related to their culture, their faith. So that is why we need to be able to explore with colleagues, with a supervisor, on our own. What do I need to learn about this person's faith? What are some of my biases maybe that I've had against this faith? How can I open my mind up a little bit more? How can I maybe receive some support in consultation? Because now I have a client that fundamentally has a belief system that I personally disagree with. And so that's why it's important to have people that you can just bounce things off of. And ethically, that is what we should be doing, especially if there is something that somebody brings in from their own belief system that is something that you have a low level of familiarity with or makes you uncomfortable. Finally, boundaries and dual relationships. And I'm going to pose this question to you all. How do you think that there could be an ethical situation, ethical aspects of boundaries and dual relationships with regard to religion and spirituality in counseling? What are some examples of where we may see some ethical issues around boundaries and dual relationships? Is it okay for a clinician to disclose their own faith or religious belief to a client? Is that acceptable under any circumstances? We also know that ethically, as I mentioned earlier, it is not ethical for us to impose our beliefs onto clients. That is a boundary that would not be appropriate in the context of therapy. You can share a faith or a religion with the client, but that doesn't mean that you can impart your own beliefs within that faith onto that client. And sometimes if you share a faith with a client, there also needs to be a really good boundary there as well, because there could be too much of a crossover into now we're becoming chatty and friendly and friends rather than keeping this relationship professional. If there's a commonality and a strong commonality in shared faith.